This is a continuation of the cross. Monday, Jesus went into the temple and said, "You have made my house supposed to be a place of prayer, but you have turned it in a den of thieves." On Tuesday, they go back to Jerusalem, him and the disciples, and it's a day of argument. The fig tree is withered away. It was a busy day, an exacting day. It was a day of strife, of antagonism, of controversy, and Jesus' final sermon to them. It would tax the mental faculties of the best of men. It began at the previous morning on the way back to Jerusalem. The brown and withered fig tree stands as a mute reminder of Monday's judgment and for all that won't do the will of God. Peter called attention to it, and Jesus used it to tell them about faith, that they were to have faith in God, that nothing is impossible if they would have faith in God. He moves to the temple. There he meets with the chief priest and the scribes and the elders. The temple is their domain, and Jesus has challenged them on it. They come to the question, who gave you the authority to do these things? They were probably saying that because of speaking of what he said throughout the money changers and the traders and what he had said to them on Monday. These people were probably listening for his answer. Their problem was sincere. Their question was not sincere. So he asked them a question. The baptism of John, is it from heaven or is it from men? He had them. If they said that it came from heaven, then he would say, well, why don't you believe in me then? But if they would say that it was the men, then they fear the people, for all men counted John to be a prophet. It was a masterful stroke by Jesus, and while the temple rulers were reeling from that, he threw at them three parables. He had uncovered their wickedness. The parable of the two sons was to prove that the practice comes before profession. Harlots and publicans or sinners are doing a better job than you, and they'll get to heaven before you. The parable of the householder or the landowner, and he sent his servants and to get the money that they had made off the land, and they had killed the servants. And then he said finally sent his son, and they killed them. He was talking about the prophets that they had killed earlier, and how that now they are going to kill him. He is prophesying his own death. The parable of the marriage feast, where he goes and gives a divine invitation and sends out to all that would come, but so many of them found excuses and they wouldn't come. The leaders came back at Jesus with a masterful piece of human reason, but they couldn't win over the divine mind of God. The Herodians first, is it lawful to pay tribute to Caesar or not? If he said no, then they're trying for sedition. But he said, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are his. The Sadducees descend on him, Master, which is the greatest commandment in the law? He came back with two. Is the greatest. Love the Lord thy God, and love thy neighbor as thyself. Christ, what do you think of Christ? Whose son is he? The son of David? Jesus goes back at them. How can he be the son of David if David through the Spirit called him Lord? He completely frustrated his cross-examiners. He had won, and they didn't dare ask him anything more. Aroused by the hypocrisy of the attack on him, Jesus pronounced a series of woes on the Pharisees, scribes and Pharisees. Edmundshire says they corresponded to the 8 Beatitudes on the Sermon on the Mount. with which his public ministry began, but now he closes with denunciation of woes to them. Love rejected is now judgment leaps upon the scene. When love is spurned, then divine judgment demands a just punishment for sin. A great crowd must have been listening to Jesus, to the withering blast of the Son of God. An approximate count could have been up to 6,000 in the temple that day. Many must have applauded secretly. The Pharisees are stripped of their self-righteousness and pretense and held up to see their true character for all to see. It sounds like a sneak preview of the great white throne judgment in Revelations, when their thoughts, even their thoughts, will be revealed and what was inside of them. He brought out what was inside, the ungodliness and wickedness that was in their hearts. He calls them the white sepulchres full of dead men's bones. Doubtless our Lord had in mind the whitewashing of the graves, or the markings of the grave with chalk, lest the Pharisees and the scribes come near and be considered ceremonially unclean. The very sight of the Pharisees, because of the hypocrisy in them and lack of love for God and people, made Jesus' blood boil. Physically and emotionally, Jesus, by this time, is exhausted. He sits down on the side of the court of the women, over against the treasury of the temple. He watched the people casting in their gifts for temple services and benevolence. His eye was caught by a widow who had deep devotion for him, gave her mites to the service of God. She gave all that she had. Jesus measures your giving by what you have left, not by what you give. He sees the heart of the giver. The sermon of the destruction of Jerusalem, and he tells about the end time of the Gentile age coming to an end. It comes from a heavy heart of Christ, preparing to leave the temple, never to darken the doors again. He leaves them with 4 warnings. The 4 key words are: beware, lest we fall into the same trap of appearing to be holy but not. Beware, watch, endure, and pray. Wise words for all of us. He went out to face the conspiracy of the chief priests, now having been joined by one of his own, Judas, as he departs. Sometime during the day, Judas had made a bargain with a priest. The day was done. He had won the battle in which his authority was attested, but he had lost Jerusalem. He had lost the temple. The people did not, the Pharisees and the scribes did not turn from their wicked ways. But he had lost Jerusalem with his disciples. He returns to Bethany. Probably by this time it is night. He reminds them that their house is left desolate, that Jesus is not going to occupy the temple there.